Great. And our first speaker will be Magda, and I would like to make some introductions. So Magda Walter is a former senior broadcast journalist for US TV networks PBS, CNN, CNBC, and NBC News in Moscow, where she was bureau chief. She is an international communication strategist, media consultant, and journalist trainer. She has led and edited several large research studies into the impact of Russian disinformation on countries of the former USSR, with recommendations for policy change aimed at strengthening independent media in the region. In this area, she has collaborated with the European Endowment for Democracy in Brussels, Center for European Policy Analysis in Washington, and the Baltic Center for Media Excellence in Riga, and spoken on panels at several international conferences. So we're delighted to have her. And yeah, I think I'll just go through all of the panelists at once first. Following Magda, we will have Kyle speaking on big tech and data security. He is founder and director of Fair Vote UK, which published whistleblower evidence of Vote Leave's lawbreaking in the EU referendum and supported Chris Wiley's whistleblower revelations around Cambridge Analytica's global data theft and misappropriation. Fair Vote UK now campaigns on digital democracy reform and platform regulation in the UK, and lawsuits against Facebook UK internationally. He is also the lead claimant in a class action lawsuit against Facebook and acts as secretariat to a parliamentary inquiry into foreign money and electoral transparency. Kyle was the chief of staff to a UK government minister and has worked on half a dozen elections, including the 2016 US presidential campaign and the 2020 US Georgia Senate runoff. His first book on the subject, The Little Black Book of Data and Democracy, is published next week. And then we're going to have Midge Purcell, who will be speaking on voter suppression and the big lie. Midge Purcell is former director of advocacy and public policy at the Urban League in Portland and a founding member of Oregon Voice, organizing to increase voter engagement and political power in communities of color. Midge has worked with Common Cause to ensure fair redistricting outcomes for Black communities, and as a grassroots lobbyist in the Oregon legislature. She is a DAUK Black Caucus and a DAUK Policy Network member. So we're really delighted that they could join us here. We also benefit from a great team in helping us to seize the moment in the second part of this event. And we're joined by Julia Bryan, our DA Global Chair. Welcome, Julia, along with Heidi Burch, Global Get Up the Vote co-chair, Karen Suhaka. Karen chairs the DAUK West Midlands Regional Group and founder of Bill Track 50. Martha McDevitt-Pugh is a member of the DNC LGBT and Women's Caucuses and of DA Voter Protection. And Steph Randall of DAUK Wales, who is a lead activist in phone banking, Get Out the Vote, Voter Reg, and now Voter Protection. So welcome everybody. And that was all a bit of a mouthful of introductions, but we're so delighted that everyone's taken their time to come to us today. So first, we would like to welcome Magda. Magda, take it away.
Thank you, Maya. Do I have my mic on? Yep.
You have your mic on, and I'm just going to put your slide up.
No, not yet.
Okay, well, when you're starting.
No, I'm not yet. I'll just give you a quick cue when.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. I just want to start to say I'm thrilled to be part of this conversation, and thrilled by the number of people who have come from all over. I will speak fast as we have little time, and just wanted to make the point that we're talking about a whole range of very complex issues that each of them would probably take 2 hours to dissect. So we need to summarize and we need to make some generalizations, but my presentation was more of a curtain raiser or a canvas for a lot of the things we're going to talk about. And it's any of the generalizations are primarily based on opinions of experts rather than pundits, so historians, social scientists, psychologists. We use the term big lie in a number of meanings in recent public discourse, but I think two meanings that fold into each other have to do with number one, the lie that has been going on for decades, the claim by Republicans for at least 40, 50 years, and Midge will elaborate on that in her part, is basically, you can summarize it that Black people can't vote or shouldn't vote. And this has been going on for a long time. There's a historical perspective on this. The second, of course, is that Trump won the election, and of course, the racial innuendo in all of Trump's and GOP's arguments in support of it are very clear as well. Now let's take a quick look at the slide, because we're going to talk about history in terms of the big lie, because we're not really talking about something that Trump or the Republicans invented. It's been a critical propaganda tool necessary for authoritarian regimes to set in. The most sophisticated applications have been in the rise of fascism and Stalinism in the last century, and Yale historian Timothy Snyder has mapped the similarities of the birth of these autocracies with Trump's rise in a book he wrote even before Trump was elected, called On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. So I think you're going to be looking at the slide right now. I can't tell if we're looking at the slide.
Yes, we are. Yep.
Oh, okay. So as you can see, Hannah Arendt, who's one of the greatest political scientists and experts on authoritarianism of the 20th century, said what you're looking at on the screen, which is before mass leaders seize the power to fit reality to their lies, their propaganda is marked by its extreme contempt for facts as such. For in their opinion, fact depends entirely on the power of a man, I think, who can fabricate it. So indeed, this has been going on for a long time, but globalization, extreme polarization, and of course technology have changed and amplified this tool's power and its distribution ability. And Kyle will talk a lot about that. Trump started laying the groundwork for his big lie in 2011 with his birtherism scenario, the claim that Obama's illegitimacy as a US citizen and therefore president that took on traction already in 2011 with part of the public that became known as Trump's base. Actually, Michael Cohen, in his book Disloyal, Michael Cohen being Trump's fixer and lawyer, said that birtherism was Trump's first big lie gamble. And the lie continued in 2016 as Trump kept repeating he did not lose the popular vote because 3 million people voted illegitimately. And again, there's some coded, loaded meaning there about the legitimacy. Snyder says, Timothy Snyder, that it's not enough for one person, no matter how influential, to get the big lie to take hold. So there need to be other messengers and amplifiers. And we had, of course, Trump on Twitter, in rallies, even before the election, his surrogates, Giuliani, Powell, the My Pillow Man, the flunkies in Congress, and so forth. We had Fox, we had right-wing radio, we had Breitbart, we had lesser-known groups of Women for America First and social media, which we're going to hear about. And also there was a role for mainstream media, which we can't really elaborate on, but maybe we can talk about in the breakout room a little later. But that's the supply side. But what about the demand side? What kinds of people are susceptible to believing those kinds of lies and conspiracies in general? One such distinct group, because there are many typologies and we can't really focus on all of them, but is the less educated, blue-collar, rural, mainly white, middle-aged men, with grievances often due to economic inequality and blaming Black people and immigrants and others for their condition. And historian Heather Cox Richardson points out that authoritarian systems usually rise because demagogues will say to groups like that, your life is not as good as it was, and those people are to blame. There's also a fascinating piece in Scientific American, which draws on what psychiatrists say about all this. And it goes, the title, The Shared Psychosis of Donald Trump and His Followers. And the psychiatrists that are cited there, and I'm just about to come to an end, but just want to make these 3 points because they'll be very important for what we're going to talk about when we talk about remedies. And the psychiatrists in very clinical terms will say that first requirement is removal of the offending agent. So the influential person with severe symptoms. So let's hope we took care of that. The other one is much more broad and complicated, which is dismantling systems of thought control, common in advertising, but now also very heavily adopted by politics. And 3, and that is very important because it really focuses on Biden's agenda very broadly, is fixing the socioeconomic conditions that give rise to poor collective mental health in the first place, and reducing inequality in all forms, economic, racial, and gender, which will help to prevent violence down the road. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magda. I'm just going to unmute Maya, who I muted earlier. Maya,
Great.
You're back.
Great. Thank you so much, Magda. That's fantastic. That was great. And so now let's hear from Kyle, who will speak to us about big tech, data security, and take it away, Kyle.
Thanks so much, Maya. It's interesting time to be speaking with everyone because we're just a few days after another massive data scandal with Facebook, where over 500 million users' data was taken without their knowledge, and they have no idea where any of that data would now be. To give you some context, that would be 5 times the scale of the Cambridge Analytica leak in the Cambridge Analytica scandal in 2017. I wanted to just give you a bit of a background ahead of the Q&A and conversations around this stuff, the role of social media in the space. As I'm sure we'd all agree, democracy depends on discourse, exchanged in a shared reality, right? We have to agree on reality to be able to negotiate what we want our world and our country to look like. It's often called the idea of the public sphere. Social media has effectively become the digital version of this. Facebook more than any other, with 3.3 billion monthly active users. 85% of the voting population in the United States has a Facebook account. But social media's incentives are not driven by the goals of shared reality or considered debate. They're private companies, and they're trying to maximize profit by selling ad space. The goal is simple for them, right? Just keep people on as long as possible. And they do that by conflating feelings and facts in a frictionless, affirmation-only environment with no adversity. If you want to keep people on, you got to keep them happy. And the way to keep them happy is to just show them stuff that they like to see. And unfortunately, because it's algorithm-driven, the algorithm's designed to go a little bit further each time. So extreme content is not only incentivized, it's built into the system. It's inherently undemocratic. It rewards extremism because it's the most enticing, not the most accurate. And that's what right-wing extremists figured out very quickly, understanding that they could abuse liberal institutions like free speech because progressive thinking is framed more by values and ideals than by the blind pursuit of power at any cost. And I do want to quickly say that this is not a freedom of speech question when we talk about social media. It's a freedom of reach question. You may have the right to say something, but do you have the right to reach 70 million people with what you said? And that's a right that the Constitution does not guarantee or protect. So now if we think about Stop the Steal and the big lie, it didn't start on January 6th or even in November. This specific frame started in 2016 when Trump first planted the seed that if he didn't win, it was all rigged. The big ethos started, as Magda was saying, with the birther movement in the early 2010s. And at the root of all of this is white supremacy, the belief that if white people haven't gotten what they wanted, then there was foul play because whiteness has for centuries been defined by, because normality has for centuries been defined by whiteness. You put that on social media, which is intentionally designed not to challenge people, but to reaffirm them. So they stay on longer and see more ads to maximize their profit. And it seems suddenly obvious that these extremist movements not only thrive on social media, but translate very quickly to real world harm and violence. And I want to finish by saying that this doesn't happen, obviously. White supremacy has been alive and well in the United States forever. But social media offers the rocket fuel with no gatekeepers, no democratic oversight, and no financial incentive to stop harmful content. And I really believe that if we fail to act in this space, we can expect a failed state in the next decade. This is central and critical in the conversation around democracy, democratic renewal, and speech. And if we don't see reining in big tech as central to the fight for democratic norms and democracy itself, then we will lose. That's it.
Thank you very much, Kyle. I'm sending it back to Maya.
Thank you, Kyle. That was great and so important. And yeah, big topics, all of the topics we could speak for ages on. And so, yeah, I guess let's move on to Midge, and then we'll see how all of that impacts voter suppression. Thank you, Midge. Take it away.
So I'd like to begin by expanding on a little bit from what Magda and Kyle was saying about why the big lie of massive voter fraud was embraced by millions of American voters. Trump began his narrative about the potential of voter fraud in the run-up to the elections. And this was clearly in anticipation of a large voter turnout amongst voters of color and young voters, which is exactly what we saw. Even though the Republicans' own agencies declared that this was the most secure election in the history of our country, the Republicans continued to perpetuate this narrative of a stolen election. So let's be clear, and I think it's been stated, the concept of a stolen election has at its foundations the belief that the votes of millions of Black voters should not count. This lie has allowed the Republicans to try to take voter suppression to a new level. And I think what we're seeing is somewhat new. And because it's now no longer just about making it harder to vote, but to discard the votes of millions of voters that has already been cast, in particular Black voters. In lawsuit after lawsuit, after the election, Republicans asked the courts to throw away votes that had been cast by predominantly Black communities. In Michigan, they literally singled out Detroit, if you remember. They literally singled out Detroit and threatened to refuse to certify its votes. So the GOP's post-election strategy was to reinstitute race-based voter disenfranchisement all the way up to January 6th, when 147 Republican lawmakers voted to straight up overturn the results of an election. The Republican challenges to election results in states like North Carolina and Arizona hinged on the fight in the courts to halt unsolicited and illegitimate votes. I mean, Kyle talked about illegitimacy. And in this case, Trump made it clear that all votes were not equal. The Republicans have been promoting this idea that Democrats cannot legitimately win elections. And this narrative is supported by 65% of Republican voters. These claims of legitimacy, I think, amounts to a denial of full citizenship for Black Americans. You saw an image a minute ago. Can you put that image up again? And can you hear me?
Yeah, Maya's just working on it. Yep.
Okay. Yep. There you go. I'm sure that you all are familiar with this image. I think it's become iconic of the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. But this Confederate flag-waving insurrectionists accomplished something that the Civil War could not. That is displaying in our Capitol a symbol of slavery and a symbol of an era when, in our history, when Black Americans were not full citizens. A time of Jim Crow segregation, which aimed to trap Black Americans in a semi-permanent status of second-class citizenship. The cornerstone of these efforts was the systematic disenfranchisement and suppression of Black votes. So this image, and I'm going to ask you to take it down now because I think we probably have seen enough of it. It just had a clear subtext for Black Americans and other Americans of color, actually quite a chilling subtext. So the Voting Rights Act of 1965 gave protection to Black voters in terms of exercising their right to vote, especially in the South. But key provisions of the Voting Rights Act were overturned in the 2013 Supreme Court Shelby versus Holder decision. In particular, oversight for those Southern states with histories of discrimination. It's interesting to note, within hours of the Shelby versus Holder ruling, efforts to suppress the Black vote in those Southern states were carried out with almost surgical precision. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about those tactics later. We are now seeing this played out in Georgia, voting ID, closure of polling places, et cetera. Voter suppression has always been the main tool in the Republican toolbox to retain power. Since the election, we have seen and will see this moving into turbocharge, especially as the demographics of the country continue to change. And Republicans look down the barrel of shrinking majorities, already evident in places like Texas. Redistricting to draw congressional districts have already begun. The states with the fastest growing populations, growth that comes overwhelmingly from people of color, face the highest risk of racial and partisan gerrymandering that would deny those emergent communities representation. This will be the first redistricting cycle in half a century without the full protection of the Voting Rights Act that has been gravely weakened by Shelby versus Holder. So these are serious challenges for us as a party as to how we begin to engage with voters, voters who have been drawn into the big lie or just the Republican narrative on issues like healthcare, tax reform, public spending, and immigration. And I'm going to end just with a quote from Stacey Abrams, because I think it sums up the implications for our democracy if large-scale voter suppression succeeds. She says, when you break democracy, you break it for everyone. Because while they may start with communities of color and young people and poor people, there are intersections in terms of policymaking that affect us all. When you break the machinery, you break it for everyone. When that happens, the durability of our democracy is immeasurably weakened. And I'll just leave it there.
Unmute. Thank you so much, Midge. Thank you for that really illuminating description of where we are in time at this moment, but also a historical perspective. Again, yeah, we could talk on this subject for ages, but I guess the best thing now is to go into breakout rooms. So we have 3 different breakout rooms. They're each going to be led by one of the panelists and a co-host to help moderate questions and manage the breakout room. That's Angelica and Griff and Avery. Thank you very much for that. David, do you want to explain some of you I know have used breakout rooms before, but David, do you want to explain for those?
I shall
who
attempt
haven't
to
yet?
explain the breakout rooms. Hello, everyone. We have 3 breakout rooms: 1 disinformation, 1 big tech and data security, 1 voter suppression and the big lie. And I'm going to open all the rooms, and I just give me a moment to reassign people who are meant to be in those rooms. The rest of you, as audience members, you're free to go into whichever room you would like to go into. That's the idea. We shall find out if that's going to work, and if it doesn't, I shall assign you. So, so Maya, does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's
okay.
right. And I'm starting to move people now, but
okay, I'm opening all rooms. And yeah, some panelists are in the wrong rooms. I'm just going to move them to where they are meant to be.
okay.
Griff, you're into there. Let's see. Avery should be in voter suppression. Magda is in the right room. Hooray. Let's see. And Midge needs to be in voter suppression. Hang on a second. Okay. I think that's working. Griff is looking a bit lonely in big tech.
So Kyle needs to be in there.
Yeah.
To be in the big tech.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll put Kyle in there.
Okay.
Find Kyle here.
And yeah,
there's
and so Angelica,
okay,
yeah.
Big tech, okay.
And so the hosts and the panelists stay in the room that they're in, but everyone else can move around and go to the rooms that they want.
Do I need to use the broadcast message to all, or is it we're going to have 20 minutes in the breakout rooms? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So
we're probably about 16 now.
okay, all right. Well, I'll do 16-minute timer on my phone here. So.
Okay, so we have lots of people unassigned, and I just want to make sure that they are able to get into the breakout rooms. And
I can't see anyone who's I'm looking for
if anyone is needing help, do let us know in the chat box. If anyone's needing help moving into the rooms. So
we have some questions here in the chat box.
So
I see.
how do you choose? You go to the room that you want to go into, and if you see there's at the bottom of the dashboard, you should have 4 little squares that say breakout rooms, and if you open that, you should be able to move your name around into the room.
You may have to hover over the blue number that you see in order to join.
Thank you, Asha. Thank you. Let's see. Bill Borden, did that answer your question? If you're still here, perhaps not. If you aren't here, then I guess you found your way.
Looks like we've got 8 people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 who are unassigned.
Evelyn doesn't see anything to choose from. So Evelyn, if you click on breakout rooms, okay, I have some unassigned people. I will just assign them as Evelyn, do you have a preference as to which room you'd like to go to? And
voter suppression, please.
Yes, off you go.
Thank you. Now I see it. Yeah.
Nicole, anything you'd like to go to? Or Charles or Bob? Look, I'll just assign randomly in that case.
Okay. Are they on mute?
Perhaps let me just see if I can unmute them. Ask to unmute. Ask to unmute. Ask to unmute. Hello, hi guys. Hi Nicole. Is there a room you'd like to go to?
Hey, sorry, yeah, I just stepped away. Can I go into the room with? How do I see the rooms?
Well,
At the
everyone
bottom-
else, breakout rooms, it should click. If you click on breakout rooms, are you able to jump into whichever room you want?
I don't see breakout rooms at all.
Oh dear. Allow me to assign you disinformation, big tech, data security, or voter suppression.
With Midge.
Voter suppression with Midge, yeah?
Suppression.
And then if I want to
Okay.
change rooms, I can come back to the main room.
Come
Yeah.
back and we'll help you out if you can't
Thanks.
see how to get in. Yeah. Charles or Bob, I'm just going to automatically assign them to rooms that don't have quite as many people. So disinformation and disinformation. Great. Everyone's assigned.
Great.
Hey, so we get to stay here, right? Or
Thank you, David. I might pop in and out.
yeah. Can you go in and come out? I'll stay here and let me know if anything's amiss. Yeah.
Okay. Are you able to assign the time so that there's like a countdown when people? Oh, Heidi.
Well, when I say close, it'll give people a minute. So, ooh, Heidi Burch is
Okay.
just joining now. So
Yeah.
where
Hi,
should
Heidi.
Heidi? Hi, Heidi.
We
We're
have a
just doing
breakout room?
breakout rooms at the moment, and you're on mute, so we won't be able to hear your answer. If you want to unmute yourself for a second, so we can chat to you. Everyone's in a breakout room if they want to be at the moment. We have 3 breakout rooms: disinformation, big tech, data security, or voter suppression, big lie. Which room would you like to go to, if any?
Hi, are you guys talking to me?
Yes, I am,
Yes.
Heidi. Yeah. You're one of you're the only human being left here, other than, well, Bob and Charles are humans, but they seem to have stepped away from the machine, or they're not. They haven't jumped into the rooms yet. So, which room do you have a preference as to which room you'd like to go to?
Yeah, I
Or
think
shall
the
I-
disinformation room would be interesting.
Disinformation. Fair enough. Okay, I'm going to
Hi, Maya.
pop you in
Hi,
there. So-
Heidi.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And we'll be about 12 minutes or so. Yeah. So
Okay, great.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
you should have a thing saying you can join now if you want to join. Yeah.
Okay. So that will do.
So
a
I'll
countdown
stay
for the-
here. You wanna go and just get your passport and travel around for a bit?
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
Cool. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, come back and let me know if there's anything that we need to do in any of the rooms, or if I need to go and help out anywhere.
So David.
Yeah, I just jumped into disinformation to check that that was going smoothly. Yeah.
So how am I can't see how I jump into the rooms now.
Oh, where are the breakout? On more breakout rooms, it might be do you still have breakout rooms as an icon at the bottom?
I have breakout rooms. When I open it, I have breakout rooms in progress, and it shows.
Yeah, it shows the first one is disinformation, and it says there should be a button join next to it.
Yeah.
And then if you scroll down, there should be in bold big tech data security, and you should be able to hit join next to that. Is that not what you're
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I can see it.
Yeah. So I'm going to go and have a look at big tech as well, and the other one, just to make sure that they're going along. But I'll come back
Okay.
here in a moment. I'm just going to go in for a nip in for a moment. So
Okay.
yeah,
So
and we
I'll
are
go-
at how many minutes left? 8.5 minutes. So.
Okay, so I'll go into disinformation for a second.
Okay, great. Yeah. Hi, Bob. If you can hear me, I just wanted to let you know you do have the option to go into one of the breakout rooms that are currently in session. You and I'm David, who's helping Maya to host this. You and I are the only ones in the main session at the moment, and my job is to kind of usher people around the meeting. So if you can hear me, and if you want to go into a certain meeting, you can unmute yourself and let me know which breakout room you'd like to join. So, thanks.
So everyone's doing good. So how many minutes do we have?
I'm giving people a 4-minute warning now. So
okay, yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm just looking at
Hi, Maya. I'm counting down the time. I'm gonna hit the close in about 2.5 minutes, and that'll give people a minute to come back. So I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I could hear you.
Okay,
Thanks,
so,
David.
so when I hit close, it'll take up to a minute for everyone to come back. So just to be aware, but I'll give people another 2.5 minutes or so before I hit that.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Maya. Can you hear me? My timer just went off.
Yeah,
and
I can hear you.
I'm just going to hit close breakout rooms now. That's should bring people back within a minute. So sound good to you?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Cool.
Great. Thanks.
I think it's working.
It does seem to be. Seems like everybody knows and everyone's moving around.
That's great. That's cool.
Perfect. I think everyone's able to get back by themselves.
This is much more smooth than I expected.
People are getting really good with Zoom. It's really
I
actually
know.
really nice. It's just really nice to see because there's so many creative ways you can do it once people know.
Yeah.
What to
Well,
do.
after a year of doing non-stop Zoom, people are getting.
I'm going to write the book.
After a year.
It took a pandemic. Okay, we're closing in 5 seconds. So, yeah, everyone should be back in a moment. Yeah.
Hey, Heidi.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I'm going to hand you back over to Maya. Maya, you are up.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So is everyone back from the room now? Yeah, that's great. So thank you so much. And thank you to all of our panelists and our room co-hosts for putting that together. I popped back and forth between the rooms and it looked really interesting and so useful to hear this information. and be able to speak in smaller groups. And so I think now we'll go into the second part of the event, where we'll have our fellow leaders and colleagues help us consider how to counteract the threats that we've been discussing to our democracy. And first, we will jump right in and take a look at what's happening at the federal level. And Julia is going to talk briefly about For the People Act. So Julia, you ready?
Here I am. Hey, so everyone, so as y'all know, S1 is the bill is HR1, the For the People Act. It's a voting rights bill. It's a very large bill. That's an administrative bill that really deals with a lot of solving a lot of the voter suppression tactics that the Republicans are throwing at voters across the states right now in all the voter legislation they're putting together. We are working directly with senators on the Hill on adding an amendment to the S1 that's in support of our voters that we call never resided voters. These are voters who would vote in 15 states across the United States if based on where their parents vote, but they're not allowed to for residency requirements. This is specifically against UOCAVA's federal civil rights, which grants the right to vote in federal elections, regardless of whether or not you've resided in that state, but based on the fact that you're a U.S. citizen. So we are in talks with Senator Kane's office. Senator Kane is a long-term great friend of Democrats abroad. We are also speaking with Senator Durbin's office. Senator Durbin is an Illinois senator who, of course, Illinois is impacted by this. We're talking to Merkley's office in Oregon. They are also a state that is impacted by this. And finally, also Senator Casey's office in Pennsylvania. And we are really pushing to get this amendment added. But what we can do, I think it's really important to know what we can all do as constituents is making sure we're getting in touch with our senators, telling them that we are in support of S1. They need to hear from you. The best thing to do, of course, is to get on the phone and call your senator and just leave a message if they don't answer. But they will take that message. They will make a check mark. Then you can also email. You can get in touch with them with text and all sorts of different ways. Make sure you're reaching out because they really do pay attention to the voices of their constituents. Sometimes people ask me, well, should I get in touch with someone else's senator? And the answer is really no. You should reach out to your own senators. They're the ones who are they're going to listen to you as a constituent. Now, when you go and I think it's important just to add for anybody doing this type of outreach, sometimes it can be discouraging because they're going to ask you for your for a US address in the United States. Hey, well, that address is your voting address. Just use that voting address. And because that way they know, oh yeah, this is my constituent. You don't, that's important. And then they might also ask you for a phone number. In that case, you can sometimes use the 011 to get your phone number through that system. But that's S1. There's a lot more information about it that we could talk about it, but I don't have enough time. So I'm going to pass the mic back to Maya. And I can also send pop the link to the never resided information that we are sharing with senators. I'll do that. I'll put it in the chat box.
Thank you, Julia. That's amazing. And it's so great to have all these meetings with Durbin and just, yeah. Really,
they're very interested in this. It's clearly a civil rights issue for everyone. They're like, well, as Senator Kane said, when I wrote him about it, he's like, this is clearly fair. Let's see what we can do about it. So one thing also, I just think it might be interesting for everybody to know is that S1 is going to be up for markup in the next month or so. And so that's when we're going to be trying to get the amendment in, is during the markup period. It's currently in the Rules Committee.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get that link in the chat.
Right. Okay. And so the next really important bill that, of course, we hope will be passed is the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Midge was explaining some of the issues around why that's so necessary. The Voting Rights Act was gutted in 2013, and the teeth that allow federal oversight to stop states from enacting voter suppression bills are no longer there. And so states across the whole of the country now, where it used to be just certain states, had to get pre-clearance. Now states across the whole of the country are just, you know, carte blanche voter suppression bills being pushed forward. So the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, or H4, would be to speak to that need now. And what does it do? It would provide a new formula to replace the pre-clearance formula that was originally in the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It will say that states that have repeated voting rights violations will get will need to have special permission to make any change in voting rights rules. It sets up a process for how new voting rules will be reviewed, particularly in areas with diverse populations, and it offers more transparency so that there's more time for the public to review bills and its impacts before they get enacted. So it's really important. Of course, this bill at the moment is, unlike For the People Act, this bill is, well, the For the People Act is now in the Senate. John Lewis Voting Rights Act has not been reintroduced into the House yet. So this is just something that we need to monitor and be keeping an eye out for, and be ready to make calls and make noise as soon as it's coming up for a vote. And both of these bills, and I think Midge was talking about this in her breakout room, but these bills probably do need filibuster reform for them to be enacted. So Julie is going to now speak about the filibuster a bit.
Well, the filibuster, as we all know by now, progressive legislation like S1 and the John Lewis bill, it's currently almost entirely halted by the filibuster. The current filibuster rules allow senators to stop the vote on any bill simply by declaring a filibuster and then going about their business. So in order to get around a filibuster, 60 senators must vote for a bill in order to pass it. This basically means there's no room or reason in the current Senate for compromise or cross-aisle cooperation. And as we see, progressive legislation gets stopped in its tracks. The solutions for this issue started eliminating the filibuster altogether. This is a rule change that could be accomplished at any time with only 51 votes, but we don't have the 51 votes yet. And so this is why we are looking into other solutions. Other solutions include requiring senators to hold the floor with uninterrupted speech. It's basically called the Mr. Smith Goes to Washington rule, based on the movie. Expanding exceptions beyond budget reconciliation. So it would include votes to raise the debt limit, expand voting rights, fund the federal government, et cetera. Also overcoming the filibuster when a bill is supported by simple majority in 2 successive Congresses. So like Congress, we are in Congress 117. If a bill had been voted for with simple majority in 116 and in 117, it would then be able to be passed. Very likely we're going to be heading in the direction of the talking filibuster. Joe Biden has come out in support of the talking filibuster. One thing that's really important to note is like the devil's in the details here. So his suggestion seems to include the opportunity to allow fellow senators to call the question, which basically means ending debate and forcing a vote once a talking senator ends their speech. And this is an important distinction because in the past, talking filibusters meant that one senator could speak and then another senator could speak and then another senator could speak, and on and on and on and on. So it was a colossal waste of time, which is why that was finally amended. But a talking filibuster where you have the ability to call the question after one senator finishes their speech would make it a lot shorter. So what can we do about the filibuster? Well, we're paying really close attention to what is happening in DC on this subject. We are waiting to hear, the best thing that we can do is join forces with other stakeholders and other allies to raise our voices on this issue. So we're kind of waiting to see how, what everyone's going to be going behind. And I think it's going to be the reforms to the talking filibuster. And if it is, we're going to be doing a huge outreach to all of our members saying, here's what you do to call up your senators, and really demand they move to the talking filibuster. Very unfortunately, it's down to a very few people. As you all know, Senator Manchin in West Virginia, Senator in Arizona as well are currently not in favor, but this is, we need to make these rules changes. And again, we only need 51 votes to make that change. So we can get to questions later on in the Q&A, but that's where we are. It's incredibly important if we want to get our legislation passed.
Thank you, Julia. Back to Maya.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, I think everyone's worrying about the filibuster, but I think it's great that there are some reforms on the table, and I think we just need to do everything we can to push for those. And
it's really interesting, the details. Honestly, it's so much parliamentarian procedure. It's who knew that we'd all be getting into these details of the Senate rules.
Yeah. Great. Well, now we've looked at some of the things that can happen at the federal level. So maybe now let's look at the state level. And Martha is here to talk to us a little about making change, making legislative change. So yeah, so take it away, Martha. I am going to share my screen, share my slide here.
Great, thanks, Maya. Thanks so much. So I'm just going to talk we've been talking already right now about what kind of pathways we have forward in terms of legislation and other things. So like Julia just said, some very specific things around procedures. And I wanted to talk a little bit just about how we as Democrats abroad can leverage all of our many, many thousands of members and really cook on all the burners that we have. So there are some really clear, actions that we need to take in order to make legislative change. There are specific pieces of legislation, but how do we actually get that done within a certain period of time? So I just want to talk about the experience that I have as someone who's worked on legislation together with Democrats abroad. And yeah, my slide can come up in a minute. That is fine. So I moved abroad in 2000. And that was a year of a presidential election. I moved abroad because of legislation. I moved abroad because I fell in love with my wife, and as a same-sex couple, we had no access to immigration law. So there was a piece of legislation called the Defense of Marriage Act, which was passed in 1996, which was signed by Bill Clinton, which meant that I couldn't live in my own country. So for me, legislation is a very, very important topic. So we worked for 12 years, and I think Bob Brager is also on this call. He's somebody who also worked with us to look to see how we could pass legislation to add 2 words to the United States immigration law. And I just wanted to share some experiences that we have with that. One of them is that legislation is a very long game. We will be doing this work on democracy for the rest of our lives, to the extent that we choose to do that. And the important thing is just to start to where we are. I think that we lack a fundamental constitutional right, affirmative right to vote. I think that's something that we really could work on. That's not going to happen tomorrow. So I think it's really important to look to see that if you can't change things tonight, what can you do? Yeah, so next slide, please. And that is the approach that we took in terms of changing the immigration law. We looked to see what is the thing that we can do today. There's a variety of things that we worked on. I think one of the things that was really important was to find things we could do that we could engage the community. We have an absolutely amazing community here within Democrats Abroad, and there's a lot of things that we can do together and make this really joyful work. We took the approach of acknowledging all of our successes and celebrating those, to be really grateful for the things that had happened. And that was one of our the ways that we were able to sustain our efforts over a longer period of time. And I want to just also point out that this kind of change isn't linear. There's a lot of serendipity and even what I would call miracles in this kind of work. So I just wanted to look at that. One thing I want to point out is that when we were doing our work, we needed to push the needle until there was 51% of people that were in favor of LGBT people having their rights. We already have that on these issues that we're talking about today. Joe Biden's agenda is supported by 65 or 70% of the people. So we're obviously in a very different world today, where it's really a specific set of the population, and especially of politicians, that are stopping what we want to do. Next slide, please. this is just a list I made last night of some of the things that we did, and I just want to emphasize a couple of them. And one is how important it is to have a personal story around the issue that you're working on. I mean, I think a lot of us here would not have been considered citizens, and we wouldn't have had voting rights at the founding of this country. And that was a really powerful story, and where you can, when you call your members of Congress and when you do the things that you want to do, to share about the fact that why this really matters to you. Can you go back up to the third slide, please? Thanks, great. It's really important to change the discourse, to talk to people and to share about why this is important to you. And some of the things that we've seen recently in Democrats Abroad, where people are working at a state level, is really important, the work that we're doing in New Jersey. So we also, in terms of changing the immigration law, we really connected together with groups that were working on the ground. Again, Midge mentioned some of the multi-generational, multiracial groups that are working locally in the states where voter suppression is happening. And it's really powerful to engage with those kinds of organizations. Next slide, please. Thanks. So, there's a lot of really straightforward things we can do in terms of reaching out to our representatives. To be really clear, it's really important to inspire the people in those congressional offices as well, and to inspire each other. So when we do have supportive members, don't ignore them. Be sure that you call and you make that 1-minute phone call and you thank them for the fact that they have supported the legislation that we care about. And if they're not supportive yet, to make that ask and share your story and ask them for what you want. And there's a whole lot of instruments that are mentioned here, and I think it's really important for each of us to look and see where is the difference that we could make. So often it's a matter of looking to see what's not happening somewhere and where you can make a unique difference and build something around that. So that's really important. Next slide, please. And I just want to give you some of the tips that I would say that we learned from our work. And one of it is just to, to talk to people that you don't know at all, and share this work, because the more conversations we have, the more opportunities that we have for change. Another thing we really did in our efforts, we really involved the people in our life, like friends and family. Because you find that people are often very supportive because they really care about you. And lastly, I just want to share another personal story about that. And it reminds me of something that Speaker Pelosi always says. I recommend you listen to her when she speaks, because she'll always say, remember the children. I was working around marriage equality in California while I lived abroad, but also on immigration equality. And I was at my brother's house once. And my niece, who was 9 years old, said, I really don't like the fact that Taunt Martha and Taunt Lynn can't live in the United States. And I said to her, well, would you like to contact your representative? Would you like to write a letter to your senator? And she sat there for a moment, and I really got that she wanted to do that. So you really want to get people and find out what they really want to do. So we went over to the computer, and I showed her to go to the website, and she wrote her letter to Senator Feinstein. And she's now a senior in college. And last year she sent me a text message. If you'll go to the next slide. This is her text message. Do you happen to have a copy of that letter that I wrote when I was 9 years old? So I found it. And if you go to the next slide, this is the future. It's really be clear that, a 9-year-old is going to be a constituent really soon. They have very powerful voices, and they can be heard. And she, was very capable of writing exactly what it is she thought and felt, about this issue and how important it was for her. And all I needed to do really was to give her the name of the bill and to teach her how to make an ask. And she is now a 22-year-old who is someone who wrote her senator when she was 9 years old. And she's politically engaged at a level that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. And I just want to, in closing, just encourage people to find, whatever creative ways, especially around engaging community and family, and to make the change that you want to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha. Back to Maya. Yep, sorry.
Thank you, Martha. That's so great, and that's so inspiring to hear about your niece. I just love that, and we definitely need to bring our children and our youngsters along. So yeah, I feel really passionate about that. That's fantastic. So on with the state, what can we do at the state level theme. We would like to hear from Karen, who obviously many of us know that she is the founder of Bill Track 50, and all of us, so many of us are using it. And so I'm really thrilled that she's speaking with us today. So take it away, Karen.
All right, time for the nitty gritty. So I am going to share a tool with you. So let me paste that into the chat box. And Maya also has it on her slides. So when she shares the slides, you will have that link in there. But I want to show you how to use it. So you can click on it and play along, or you can just watch me play with it. But first, I want to give you a little bit of context. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to share my screen, and maybe this will work. Right. Okay, so hopefully a map came up and you're all looking at the United States. So this is the avalanche of legislation that was generated by the big lie. So these are voter suppression bills, although I did throw in a couple of bills that maybe aren't so bad. So it's not quite all voter suppression bills. But the darker the color, the more bills there are. So you can see Arizona and Georgia, not surprisingly, have kind of the most activity going on. And then other states maybe have less going on, but every state has something going on. So there is that. And let's see, made a little chart. Yes. So these bills, a lot of them are just introduced and haven't made it any further. That's this pie chart, a piece of this pie. A lot of them are in committee and just still in the first chamber. And so there's a chance that they're just going to die and not go anywhere. These bills, these 30 bills have crossed over, which means they've made it from where they were introduced and they got voted on and agreed to and sent to the other chamber. These are ones that might pass. And then there are 12 that are actually done and you are aware of a lot of those, like those make the news. 32 have died without going anywhere. All right, so, and then I wanted to say most of these were bad, but I did put in some good ones because I like to keep it light. I'm a Democrat, I'm optimistic, you know, there's good stuff too. All right, so let's put that away. That was just some context. All right, so this is what I linked to you. So it's a grid of all the bills, and I'll be adding more bills over time. But there's 305 bills in here already. So these are most of the Brennan Center bills, plus everything that had to do with UOCAVA that I could find, and some other stuff too. So this grid is, you know, you can sort and filter and do all of the normal things you would expect to do in a grid. So one of the things, I want to show you a couple bills and in the process, hopefully teach you how to use this grid. Oh, and it will update automatically. So every day the latest actions will be in here. If there's committee hearings, if there's votes, all of that will be in here all the time. So you can come back and check on your state from time to time if you're just interested in what's going on. All right, so first we have a filter in here. So I've got my position, description, and category, which was my best attempt. Me and some friends kind of filled this in. So it's not necessarily technical. Hopefully it's reasonably accurate. And we just said opposed to bills that made it harder to vote. And we put support in for bills that we thought made it easier to vote. And that's the good and bad pie chart that I showed you. All right, so if I hover over the name of a column, I get these three little lines. That's the filter. So here I can say, show me the UOCAVA bills that I wanted to highlight. So in Alabama now, I've got this bill. I can click on the bill number and I can see that Republican Randy Wood sponsored this bill, and we can look at the bill text and we can see that what he's doing is saying, so right now you have to have witnesses and witness to your ballot, but UOCAVA voters, and this is underlined, so this is what they're inserting is the law. So they're inserting that UOCAVA voters are no longer required to have their affidavit witnessed. So great, easier to vote. Thank you, our Republican friend in Alabama. Then we've got Rhode Island with this interesting bill, which is actually all about entitling us to vote electronically once they figure out how. So that's kind of cool. Maybe it'll get somewhere. So far, these all haven't moved yet. And then this Wisconsin bill is kind of a contrast to our bill in Alabama. So if we look at what they're doing, they are specifically saying, it used to say, unless the applicant is military or overseas, and they crossed out overseas. So military still doesn't have to provide proof of identification, but they're trying to change it so that overseas voters do have to provide proof of identification along with their ballot. So great, thanks. Okay, and then I had one other one that I kind of wanted to highlight. So I'm going to come back here and say reset filter. And let's see, I think I'm going to filter this to Vermont bills. There we go. So I can go into the state column and filter to a state. And they have this act establishing a homeless bill of rights. And one of the rights they establish is that homeless should have the right to vote, the right to have whatever documentation they need to establish an identity card if that's required, just saying that you should have the right to vote regardless of your housing status. And I thought that was a lovely bill. So I just wanted to highlight, you know, kind of a good one. So yeah, so that's just this tool, and that's what I was hoping to show you. One other thing you might want to keep track of, and this is another link that I shared, is if your state's in session right now. So the purple states have already finished their legislative session for the year, and so they're done. So if you're in one of these states, there's not much more that's going to go on unless they have a special session. The green states are still meeting. And if you click on a state, you can see when their session finishes. A lot of states wrap up in May or June. Only a handful of states go year round. So stay aware of that. If you're going to take an action, probably now is the right time to go and see what's going on. And if it's in that first chamber or second chamber, and then reach out to the appropriate person. And if you don't know who your representative is, my favorite place to look is Ballotpedia. So they have a Who Represents Me page, type that in, and you'll be able to figure out who you should reach out to. Right, that's what I got. Let me give up my sharing.
That's fantastic, Karen. Thank you so much. We're all kind of busy using this new opportunity to track bills and do different things. So it's really, really helpful that you're, well, that you've created the opportunity, the software to do it.
My pleasure. And everybody has the right to use BillTrack 50. It's free, so you can sign up, billtrack50.com. So, you know, go in, get your account and look up whatever you want. It doesn't have to be voting bills. It can be anything at all. If you're interested in marijuana legalization or whatever, go look it up, see what's going on.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So on that note, one of the things that could be done if you were tracking a bill and you were feeling concerned about something is make a call to your elected official. And so we are going to have Steph, who is volunteering to do that for us. So Stephanie, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to mention a little bit about taking direct actions and making calls. Then I'll do a model call, and then I will share links for some specific voting rights calls that we're encouraging everyone to take during April. So as Julie was mentioning, one direct and straightforward action we can all take is to contact our elected representatives. You can email or you can tweet, but a really effective action is to call their office directly. And as Julia said, they really do pay attention. I've personally known some people who've been staffers for senators and reps in DC, and they do keep tallies on what they're getting phone calls on, and they share those tallies in morning meetings with their senator or rep every morning. And if each day they're getting, 30 calls supporting something and 5 against, the member of Congress does take note. And if they're getting lots of calls that are specific, like maybe a lot of calls from constituents abroad, they might mention that too. So it's good to call to express your views, urge them to support bills or take action on issues. And no matter where you vote, it is important and effective to call. Even if you live in a blue state and you know your rep's views are pretty aligned with yours, still call them to thank them. It's also important. Most people only call to ask for things or when they're upset. Thanking them is also good. It also helps them know that their constituents support them, which is especially important for controversial issues. And you also always want to say you live abroad but vote in their state. That also helps them remember that they do have constituents living overseas, that we exist, because I often forget that. They need to remember us and represent our views as well. And another thing I've begun always mentioning is how many of us there are, that there are over 6 million voting age citizens abroad. Most Americans don't know that, reps don't remember it, so it's great to get that fact out there, even just for the staffer who answers the phone. So a few important things to always do on a call, have some talking points or a brief script ready before you call, even just a few bullet points. You want to give your name, say where you live abroad, that you vote in their state. If they ask for your address, as it was said, always give your U.S. address, your voting address, where you vote. State what you're calling about, and then at the end, I always thank them for representing my views. And if you reach someone live, you can also ask for their name just for accountability, and you can note that down. And then the last thing, it is easy to get nervous calling like this if you've not done it before, but always remember, you're just a person speaking to another person expressing a view. Sometimes I still stutter a bit or feel awkward, and that's okay. The main goal is just to get your message across so they can take note. It doesn't need to be perfect when you call. So today I'm going to call one of my senators about S1. I vote in Connecticut, so I'm calling my Senator Chris Murphy, who is Democratic. It's Saturday and they're still teleworking due to the pandemic, so I plan to get his voicemail, which says that at a bit of length. I've called him before. But so you know, I have also called my rep during the pandemic, and I always get a staffer. So even now, it's hit or miss during the week. And again, you always do want to call, of course, during your US hours. So kind of afternoon our time is good. First thing in the morning isn't always the best. East Coast, they're usually answering calls after about 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. And I'm going to be calling via Skype on my phone on speaker, so you should be able to hear. So here we go. Oh, it's not.
Thank you for calling the office of U.S. Senator Chris Murphy. We are currently teleworking in our D.C. office and following guidelines given by the Office of the Attending Physician and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The Senator will continue to communicate with his constituents, so please leave your name, phone number, address, email, and a brief message. For more information on coronavirus, visit www.cdc.gov coronavirus.
Hi, this is Stephanie Randall, and I'm a constituent of Senator Chris Murphy. I live in the UK and vote in Connecticut, and I'm calling about S1, the Senate version of HR1, the For the People Voting Act. I strongly support S1, and I hope you will do everything you can to pass the strongest possible bill supporting voting rights. There are over 6 million voting age citizens who live outside the US, and as one of them, I hope you'll also support any and all measures to make it easier for all of us, civilians and service members, to vote from abroad. One measure being considered is giving all overseas voters the option to return their ballots electronically. 30 US states already allow this. I ask that you please push to include this in the final version of the bill. I hope you will also consider steps to either abolish the filibuster or reform it to allow S1 and other key bills to pass. Thank you so much for representing me and my views. If you want to contact me, my voting address, my address is 59 Wascoosie Lane, Stamford, Connecticut, 06902. And if you'd like to contact me, email is best. My email is stephanie.randall@gmail.com. That's stephanie.randall@gmail.com. Thanks a lot and have a great day. Okay, so there you go. A bit of a long email, but a voicemail, but I always like to mention some specifics. And as I said earlier, this month there are several actions we're asking everyone to take to support, protect, and expand voting rights for all Americans, including those of us who live overseas. And this includes calling our reps, so both senators, your member of the House of Representatives, as well as state senators and reps as well, if you have some voter suppression bills. And we're encouraging everyone to take one or more action each week in April. There's also corporations to call to thank them and ask them to do more of as many things. So I'm going to put some links in the chat box here. Here is a link to suggested actions for April, including scripts as well. And also to easily call the US from abroad very inexpensively, you can use either Skype credit or Google Hangouts. I tend to use Skype credit. It's just 2 pence a minute. I know some people also use Google Hangouts. So I will put that in the chat box as well, links to get credit and instructions on how to do that. One other thing I want to mention that in April, we're having Action Fridays. So drop-in meetings every Friday at 4 p.m., which is a good time to call DC offices or East Coast. So if you can, every Friday this month, 4 p.m., take a tea break, drop by, learn about actions, and then we're inviting people to go into breakout room and make a call directly and then come back and tell us how you went. So the Zoom link will be the same every Friday. So I will pop that in the chat as well. So please pop that in your calendar and come if you can. So yeah, that's the end of my piece. Thanks a lot. And hopefully you're all emboldened and feel more confident making calls. Doesn't need to be perfect. Just want to get your message across and let them know what we support and what we're asking for.
Woohoo! Well done with your call, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Maya. I'm just gonna spotlight you again. Just 1 second. I'll get to you. Yeah. So.
No, that was great. I was just saying, well done for your call, and applause for that. And that was great. And yeah, we all should be. There's so many things to make calls on it. If we just did like one every few times a week or something, just to kind of keep on top of it, then that would be great. So one of the things that I'm not really going to spend time talking about, but I would like to share with you is just some information about ballot initiatives, because I think it's something that we could actually, I'm going to post it in the chat box so that you could look at it in your offline, because I think it's something that we could really explore a bit more of from afar. And I think the next, looking at the state issues, I think anything that we can do to maximize, amplify the voices of people doing the work back home is really important. And with that, I think we are going to go on to Heidi, and Heidi is going to talk to us about Get Out the Vote and all of the wonderful stuff that she does. So take it away, Heidi.
Okay, can you all hear me okay? Thank you, Maya. I'm Heidi Burch. I'm the chair of the Get Out the Vote team, global. And all of the great stuff everyone's doing to work on legislative changes, to contact their congresspeople, their state legislators, it's so important. And they really want to know that you are a voter, that you are a constituent, and you can affect their election or re-election. And the best way to get people in who will make the changes that we need, that we want, that will respect voting rights and enhance them rather than suppress them, is to vote. And the best thing for overseas voters to do is to know you can vote and make sure you are registered to vote and will get your ballot. And also make sure your friends, your family, people you meet on the street know that they can vote. And we strongly encourage every overseas voter to send in the form, the federal postcard application, which is the form specifically for overseas voters. Now, I know a lot of people are like, I'm registered to vote before I left. My mom sends me my ballot. I just send it in. That is not a good thing to do. It's plan B, but it's much better if you register as an overseas voter using this one-page form, the FPCA form, because it gets you very important benefits under federal law, the UOCAVA Act, which is for overseas voters specifically, and it provides us with a lot of benefits that regular absentee voters don't get. And now with all the suppression bills that are going on, that are going to suppress mail-in balloting, it's even more so. So I'll just tell you what the benefits are. When you send in your FPCA form, that means you will get a ballot for every election in that calendar year. That includes primaries, special elections, runoff elections, whatever you have. Some states do not allow you to do that. They will make you send in a ballot request for every single election that year. So that's a big benefit. You do it once in January and you're done. And I should point out that to do this, it's very easy. It's a one-page form. You go to votefromabroad.org, which David, I see, put in the chat box, and it just walks you through it. So you send it in, we tell people do it in January, and that way you won't forget. And it covers you for the calendar year, particularly in an off-year election like 2021. There's not a whole lot going on in most states, but if there is a special election in your jurisdiction, you'll know about it. They will have to send you a ballot. The other benefit is that you can request that your ballot be sent to you by email or fax or online download. Particularly with the problems we've had with the mail system, with COVID, and with the US postal system being so bad, getting ballots sent by mail, particularly internationally, was not really an option. Being able to download your ballot, knowing it will be received no matter where you are in the world. So if you're traveling, if you're moving about, your ballot will come to your email. That's a huge advantage. It also has to be sent out to you 45 days before the election. So for the November 3rd election, that meant they had to send it out by September 19th. That allows much more time. Most states, it's 30 days with in-state ballots, and they'll be mailed. That doesn't give a lot of overseas voters the time to fill out their ballot and send it back by the deadlines. And those deadlines are also different for overseas voters. When you're an overseas voter, many states will allow you to both return your ballot electronically rather than having to mail it, or may give an extended deadline. So say Georgia requires you to mail back your ballot, but it will give an extra 3 days for the ballot to get to Georgia. Some states are a lot more generous. Washington State gives you an additional 20 days if you decide to mail it, but you can also email it back as an email attachment. It's very safe to do this. It is an email attachment. So it is a picture of your ballot. You have your hard copy ballot, you take a picture of it, you email the attachment to your local election office. They download that and print it out. So there are hard copies on both sides. It's not an electronic vote that someone can pass. And then finally, the other thing you get to do is if you don't get your ballot in time, or you're afraid that you might not, which was a huge challenge for many people this past election, if you send in your FPCA form, you are eligible to use what's called the Federal Write-in Absentee Ballot, lovingly known as the FWAB. And this is only available for overseas voters. If you won't get your ballot in time, or just worry that you won't, you fill this out. We have a link to it on votefromabroad.org. You fill out this write-in absentee ballot. It will cover at least federal elections. Many states also allow it for state elections if there are any. And send it in. If you get your ballot in time, great. You also send in your original ballot and they will discard the FWAB. That is under federal law. It's not double voting. It is an either or. If you don't get your state ballot in time, then the FWAB is counted. And that way you protect your vote. So the most important thing you can do is to vote, is to send in your FPCA form, go to votefromabroad.org and fill in your form. It takes like 10 minutes. You can, most every state, you can submit it electronically, and Vote From Abroad has a online submission button where you sign the form by a photograph of your signature and submit it directly to your state. There are a few states that require you to print it out and again, send it as an email attachment. And there are a few states where if you're not registered to vote, you have to mail it in. That's one of the things we're trying to change. But every state except Alabama says you can email it in if you're a registered voter. It's very quick, it's very easy. The two things you need to do once you've done that is, one, spread the word, make sure your friends and your family register to vote and particularly those overseas, but also those back in the US. Make sure they're not forgetting or thinking that it doesn't matter. We've seen what a huge difference a few votes can make. The other thing to do is follow up. Never assume everything is going smoothly when it's your ballot. Make sure, contact your local election official. It's in the instructions from Vote From Abroad after you submit it to, give it a couple days, but email your local election official, make sure they received it, make sure everything's okay, and you will be getting a ballot. Things get lost, mistakes happen, there's humans on the other end, might go to the wrong department, somebody hits the wrong key. You just want to follow up and make sure. They're usually very helpful and want to help people to vote. And then, when ballots are due out, if you don't get your ballot, when it's due to get to you, and since you've asked for it electronically, it should come immediately. Follow up, where's my ballot? Then when you send in your ballot, make sure it's been received. A lot of states have websites where you can check, but if yours isn't showing up, get in touch. Do not assume everything will work out okay. It's too important. And the same goes for your friends and family. Make sure they follow up, that they vote and that their vote is counted. And I'm seeing some questions on the database, on the chat thing here. So I'll just look through the chat and see if there's anything that, the FPCA form is right on votefromabroad.org. It walks you through every step of the way. It's a one-page form. It's very straightforward. There are some explanations. And if you have any questions, on every page of Vote From Abroad, there's a help desk symbol. There's a little orange smiley face on the bottom right corner on every page. You can click on that and type in your question, and we will get back to you. A voting assistance volunteer will get back to you to answer any questions you might have. We can also help, logistically, if you need to print it out for your state and you have problems finding a printer, we can help out. And let me think.
Yeah, we had a question from Magda. I don't know whether that you wanted to address that.
Yes, I'm reading through here. Can DAUK UK develop a database with advice on how stating intend to return may affect your state tax liability? Well, we do have a frequently asked questions section. And right now the form says you choose, do you intend to return, or is your return uncertain? And for some states it asks if you're a never resided person, a child of US citizens who was born abroad and has not lived in the United States. We don't give tax advice. We're not tax lawyers. We can't take on the liability of giving people tax advice, but the standard advice is that if you intend to return is a subjective decision, what your intent is. You don't have to have a date certain, you don't have to have a plane ticket in hand, but you do have to have an intention to return someday. But it could, based on your circumstances of your life and your finances, leave you open to state income tax liability. Whether your state makes you liable for state income tax depends on, one, if your state has state income tax. States like Florida and Texas, Washington, Nevada do not. But it's not just one thing. It's state courts have their own rules and they look at the totality of your circumstances. Whether you say intend to return is not definitive, but it can be one factor. So we can't say definitively whether or not, but if you're worried about it, or you just don't know what your intention is, then it's best to say that your return is uncertain. Many states will still allow you to vote in state elections if you say your return is uncertain, but there are some states like Georgia that will say you can only vote in state elections if you state that you intend to return. That's really the best answer I can give you. Is it depends on where your income is generated, what your ties are to your state, whether you own real property in the state, you know, all sorts of individual factors. And that's why we tell people to ask a tax advisor. So I'm sorry, I can't give you a better answer than that, Magda.
Thank you, Heidi. It's fantastic. No problem. Okay.
Just reading through, is there anything more here? Yeah, so if anybody has questions, please use the help desk feature on Vote From Abroad, or I'll put my email address in the chat box. I'm happy to answer questions. And for the 2022 elections, we are going to be continuing to train people to be voter assistance volunteers so that they can answer questions people have as they fill out their FPCA form and then as they return their ballots. We want to make sure every vote is counted and that there isn't, someone's vote is rejected for a reason that we could help them with. So thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, so we'll just very quickly go on to voter protection for a little bit, because of course, casting your ballot is one thing, but making sure that it is counted is obviously critical. I'm just going to share my screen really quickly. Right. Okay, so I'm going to include this link, pop this link into the chat box so that you can get, so you can read some offline. But some of the things that, two of the things that we're doing now in the last couple of months in 2021, which we're really excited about, is working with the state legislative teams that have sprung up. And we have been using lots of data that we've been able to gather during the 2020 general election cycle. We've had 2 big voter surveys and gathered data from intercom cases coming in, and there's a huge database, and we're able to really drill down and give stories and testimony and analysis to the state team. So that's been really exciting, and there's scope for using it in so many ways for voter advocacy. And the other thing that we're doing is we are doing a bill track project, which some of the members on this call and in the audience are helping with, and we're tracking bills using Bill Track 50 to focusing on all the battleground states and key states for voters from abroad to see what states are, if they are enacting bills that will impact overseas voters. And so that's been a great opportunity. And out of that, for Georgia, we've actually found one bill that we are now preparing an amicus brief for, and Julia will speak a bit more about that, but there's just a whole range of opportunity now at the state level and at the federal level on how to take action. And I'm going to pop this link into the chat box so that you can read more about what we're doing at your leisure. And so I'm going to stop sharing this and move on to Julia, and she can tell us about the amicus briefs.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Maya. Maya is a great partner on the voter protection team. It's really fun to work together. So the amicus brief is basically it's a legal document that you can file along with a legal case that provides more information for the judge or the people making decisions when they're reviewing the case. We've already filed several amicus briefs. In last year, we did that. I don't know if you guys remember those really reprehensible cases in Pennsylvania where Donald Trump was trying to claim that people their votes shouldn't count. Some great lawyers, the lawyers really did a wonderful job in 2020 of defending our rights to vote and they filed a bunch of cases that were basically able to, they were able to throw out these awful rulings. And so we also filed amicus briefs to support this, talking about the impact of this legislation and these cases and how it would impact our rights to vote. And we're doing the same thing right now for Georgia. As you know, HB 531 was just passed in Georgia. This is a truly horrible bill that impacts a lot of Georgians' rights to vote. And we are working right now with a law firm run by Remy Green. They're a wonderful, very progressive lawyer who has worked with us in the past, frankly, very brilliant. And some of these amicus briefs are actually fun to read. I recommend it. And so we are working on an amicus brief right now with that team. We're going to be talking about our survey data, because we have a wonderful survey that Maya was just talking about. We will be also talking about different stories of people in what happens when the propaganda of a state, when states talk about voter suppression, we know that type of propaganda leads to people not voting. We'll be able to bring stories to and insert them in the amicus brief about this, where people said, well, because you were supporting me and I knew that you were protecting my vote, I actually took the time to send in my ballot, pay the money to, the $50 to express mail it back to Georgia, and how the propaganda could deter them from doing this in the future, and why this is so important that it be thrown out. We'll also be talking about one aspect of the bill where there's, one aspect of the bill talks about people not being able to help other voters with registration process. This could really impact our work with Georgia voters. We'll have to make really careful sure that we do not handle the physical FPCA form, and that's going to impact a bunch of different aspects of the way we work with voters. So again, these are all things that we will be bringing into the amicus brief. Anything else you wanted to ask about, Maya, in terms of the brief?
No, I think that's right. It was just a breakdown of what it is and what it's doing, and that's great, fantastic.
Yeah, and we'll insert it probably at the district level, and then it might go up further. We'll keep on with briefs. What you tend to do is you send in a kind of a basic one as soon as possible after a case is filed, and then as it goes up in the courts, you can add more onto it, and that's what we did in Pennsylvania. So even though we filed several, they were mostly the same with additional information added.
Yeah, that's fantastic. But it's really just goes to show that, we start off with a small team using Bill Track 50, tracking bills. Will we find anything? Is there an issue? And then, it's nice to see it kind of go through these stages so that it actually is reaching who needs to be reached. So that's Absolutely. Fantastic.
And also one thing I thought that Karen Suhaka's presentation really, really emphasized is, as we've gone through all this legislation, we keep seeing this terrible legislation really impacting absentee voters. And then very, very often, what do we see? We see accept UOCAVA voters. And I just have to say, we need to tell that story over and over and over again about why you have to fill in the FPCA form, because when you are a UOCAVA voter, you have 1,000 times more voting rights than when you are, sadly, when you're a regular state absentee voter. So don't let your friends vote state absentee. Seriously.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you everybody for sharing such invaluable information and these really important issues and helping us work out how we can take action best from afar. And so now we will have time for Q&A. And in the meantime, while we're doing that, I'm going to be dropping some links into the chat box for you for information that I hope that you'll take away with you. Erin is going to be moderating the Q&A for us. So Erin, if you're on board, that would be great. And we will start with the co-hosts from the breakout rooms, just giving some update on what was happening in the breakout rooms, any questions, panelists, any comments. And Angelica, did you want to start and then followed by Griff and then by Avery? So we'll do an order of presentations.
Yeah, thank you, Maya. I was in the room on disinformation with Magda Walter. Magda drew our attention to start with to one of the articles she mentioned from Scientific American on the psychosis of Donald Trump. And I'll share the links later on because they're really good articles. And also an article on explaining a bit how Biden is depoliticizing his whole the whole presidency. So he never used politics as part of his agenda. He used it, he mentioned unity, he mentioned many other aspects, but he never made it about politics. And this in itself helps a bit more to bring everyone together and to go against the disinformation. We had a few questions on, okay, this is great, but are we convincing enough as Democrats? Is this a right messaging? But I think we're moving in the right direction. Julia highlighted that Democrats get it. They get the danger of disinformation, and they're working really hard on this. The DNC has a whole team working on this information right now. So there are resources, there are teams, this is being thought about. We also had some questions on, okay, but should we reframe the message? Should we perhaps be more aggressive as Democrats? And some of the participants mentioned the Lincoln Project and how the language of the Lincoln Project was a bit more confrontational and the Democrats were a bit less confrontational. So should we adopt that kind of language? And I think some of the takeaways is we need to be more proactive. We need to become more attractive and get smarter at communicating and this whole reframing the way we communicate. And someone mentioned Michelle Obama's and Barack Obama's phrase on when they go low, we go high. And perhaps maybe when they go low, we should also go low. And we should be smart about how we go low. And this is where some of the Lincoln Project tactics were mentioned around this. And I think towards the end, we went back to talk about the Biden administration and how Biden is making it very clear how his programs will benefit people. And this is one of the things that the Obama administration didn't quite get to making the connection of this program is good for you, for everyone in America. I think Biden is working really hard from the start to make sure that everyone understands this is good for everyone. It's not good for a certain group. It's not Republicans versus Democrats. It's just good for all. And this is, in a way, dismantling this whole disinformation campaign. And it also the fact that Biden hasn't engaged on this whole balancing of lies or the Republican versus Democrat, but he's looking for a more of a united and an agenda of unity. So that's, I hope I made it justice. That's in a nutshell, more or less what we talked about. And with many questions around, how should we communicate better? And are we gonna be effective, and how to improve as the Biden administration goes on and we approach elections. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Anelika. Back to you, Maya. Sorry.
Thank you, Anelika. And if anybody has questions or comments, remember to put * hand up in the chat box. Yeah, let's go on to Kyle's group, and that's Kyle and Griff. So Griff, you were hosting for that room for the big tech.
Yes, hi. And so, yes, I was hosting, but it was very much Kyle running the show. And Kyle, do feel free to interject. I was mostly trying to sort of manage people still having turns to speak. And there was so much to cover. So yeah, I guess the general questions of what can we do with these platforms, are they still usable or not? I think maybe Kyle, if you'd like to interject on some of this, because you were very helpfully kind of providing multiple angles to the difficulties of why, for example, you aren't using some of these social platforms yourself, but how we need to be so upfront and forceful about ways that we can control the power that they are providing without a set of constraints, and just how easily they can be manipulated. Not to mention the complete lack of kind of, there is the sense of oversight that is provided of Facebook, but that isn't public in a way that we that allows us to deal with the fact that at the end of the day, their business model is traffic. And so what is going to lead to more people keeping attention, and that's their whole revenue business, and how to square that with the huge harmful influence that it has. One of the topics, I think, was the prospect of Trump still retaining a Facebook account. There was two books that were suggested for people to look into, which I'll put a link to in the chat. And Kyle, do please, I'm not very good at summarizing things efficiently. Please interject if you find that helpful.
No, I think you did a great job. Thanks. No, I mean, we basically just sort of said, we're talking about what you can do as an individual and what you can do on the national level. So as an individual, reassess, do I need these things? Are they adding to my life? Is there an alternative? And on the national level, if you're calling your Congress people and your senators, mention tech regulation as well. And don't let regulation of big tech fall out of the frame around voting rights, because it is essential. Reforming regulation of big tech is essential to ensuring voter integrity and voting rights. Is sort of where we landed. And if you get into the argument around free speech, just remember that the line, this is not a conversation, we're not arguing about free speech, we're arguing about free reach. Because that's the biggest argument to try and get over with people. And that's it. Thanks, Griff.
Oh, sorry. There was one interesting topic that was brought up on the kind of the possibility of, I mean, there were many interesting topics, but one that I thought was worth bringing up was the possibility of bipartisanship. And I think that your kind of reaction was that wasn't going to be that productive, but I maybe that's a useful thing to kind of continue on in further conversation later.
Yeah, like always open to it, but if they don't want to do the reform that's necessary, then we have to plow on, right? Which is why the filibuster reform stuff is so important.
Yeah.
Only one party's trying to destroy democracy. Just let's not forget that.
So true.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, fantastic. So, Avery, do you want to give a breakdown of what was covered in the breakout room with Midge?
Yeah, hi, thank you, Maya. So I was in the breakout room with Midge talking about voter suppression, and there was a lot to talk about, and we definitely could have talked about it for much more than 20 minutes, but I'll try to summarize what we came up with as best as possible. So we started off by talking about the problems with the attacks on the Voting Rights Act and how that's a fundamental issue that's taking away a lot of the protection that was there previously. And then it was mentioned about voting, the right to vote being in the Constitution. And we talked about the 15th Amendment and how that's supposed to protect the vote and protect against discrimination from the vote, from being able to vote. And then that kind of brought us to how it's never really phrased as an attack on the Constitution or attack on the right to vote. It's always just protecting voter fraud and that kind of thing. And then we went on to what we can do to help. So supporting organizations on the ground like Fair Fight and not underestimating the power of people. And then we talked about the filibuster and the reformation of that. And then a little bit about the dangers of, even if that does pass, then whether the Supreme Court will just be able to gut that and stop that from actually changing. And so we got into a little bit about how Biden has recently set up a commission to look into the Supreme Court. So yeah, that's just a little summary of what we talked about. I don't know if Midge wants to add anything to that.
No, I think that was a really good summary. And I just want to add on the filibuster, and I think that this is really important. Yes, if we pass voter rights bills, they have the possibility of being undermined in a Supreme Court ruling. However, I also think that this gets to the point of why we vote. It's not only voting rights bills. I think Black Americans and all Americans, they want to see progress. They want to see progress on a progressive agenda, which is another reason why we have to get rid of the filibuster, because otherwise the Republicans will do their very, very, very best to prohibit, to prohibit our party from passing an agenda around economic justice, racial justice, and this is what people who voted for our party, this is what they want to see. So I think that that's another reason that the filibuster is really important. And the other thing is, in terms of what we need to do, and I think somebody mentioned it over the course of this conversation, is that we need to have conversation with white voters. We need to have conversations with the voters that voted for Trump and voted for the Republican Party. They're all not raving lunatic white supremacists. And we have to have those conversations one-on-one, one by one. So that's another thing that we kind of touched on in the conversation that we had in the group.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Midge and Avery, for that summary. So much information and so much to discuss and to chat about. Erin, were there any other questions in the chat box or anything, or comments or anything that people wanted to make or would like to make now?
Just one, well, yeah, just one that I saw earlier in the chat, and it was, how do we try to make this a bipartisan issue? Is any of these topics bipartisan as opposed to just Democratic priorities? Is that possible? Should we try?
Who wants to take? Who wants to? Mitch, do you want to speak to that? Was that for all of the issues?
It came up in the chat. I mean, I'm not sure exactly. Bob Balagan, you're the one who asked that question or started that. Bragar, sorry, and I paraphrased it and modified it a little bit. But I mean, I think it could be applied to all of them.
Yeah.
Or anyone who wants to answer.
Karen, did you want to say something?
Well, I sure do have opinions on this. Broadly, the public, if you take polls, supports, Republicans even support many of these voter reforms. Americans are fair-minded on the whole, and kind of do believe one man, one vote. And if pressed, if they're not told if it's a red or blue proposal, then they'll agree with many of the reforms that are in the Voting Rights Act. And in fact, the Voting Rights Act itself is pretty popular when you lay out the provisions in it. So it is bipartisan from the sense of people agree with it. It's the legislators that don't. And so, they need to hear from their constituents to the degree that they're persuadable at all. The problem is a two-party system, and that's all I want to say. Stop.
Yeah.
And I'd love to jump in on this as well, because, for the amendment that we're working on with for S1, we are actually reaching out to military groups. We're reaching out to Americans abroad groups to get bipartisan support. That is, we know that's important. The senators' staff ask us for this. So, the more people who are responding and saying, yes, this is important to me, it's not just a D issue. The staffers really like that, and so do the senators. So this is we do this from taxation point of view. We're doing this with the S1, and it's definitely something that Democrats abroad knows is important from a legislative angle. And frankly, people just telling their stories, it doesn't matter which side of the fence they vote on. It's their personal stories are so important.
Does Stephanie want to jump in? And I see you making a comment there.
It's not really a question, it's just a bit of a rant and a soapbox. And it's so frustrating. There's so many issues that are bipartisan. With it, over 90% of Americans support expanding background checks for guns, and then it doesn't get passed. And to me, I think that a key root problem for all of this is money in politics, because it doesn't matter what constituents say. Senators and reps need to spend, I think it's well over 50% of their time in office fundraising. They're not, reading bills or trying to represent constituent views. They have to get enough money to be able to counteract the NRA and many other lobbyists and corporations. And, I know a lot of us know this, but I think it's a key thing if we could find a way to get money out of politics and, reverse Citizen United and all these related things, then actually constituents' views would be a larger consideration in how legislators vote and what gets passed. And I certainly don't have the answer to that, but I feel like that's kind of an underlying issue to so many of the things that frustrate us and what we're discussing. Yes, it wasn't really a question, it's a little rant, but it always comes back to me that it's a huge thing that we don't always talk about, but it's an underlying problem that poisons so much.
Yeah. Don't you guys think that Georgia is and Coca-Cola and Delta, that's a really good sign that the corporations are saying, our millennial consumers are really going to be pushing us more towards this more progressive attitude. I really see great hope there.
Yeah, that's what Magda, I think, is touching on there. Magda, if you had any further points on that, go right ahead.
Actually, David, thank you. But I actually was going to say exactly what Julia just said. And it's not just that, but you remember how corporations started at least freezing, if not withholding, their contributions to Republicans after January 6th. So it's not just in response to Georgia voting laws, but I think because of the demographics and especially because of the millennials and their attitudes, I think the corporates will start thinking and putting their money or putting their mouths where their money is or whatever.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think Karen was going to say something.
It's only because we're the majority. It's not because they found morals. It's not because we can trust them.
No.
Get to continue operating. But as long as there are more Democrats, and there are, that's why the Democrat wins the vote every time. And younger people are very much Democrats. Then they have to listen to us, and they can't ignore reality. Not unlike Republicans who can pretend that they're in the majority, they're not. And when our dollars count, like, that's reality, and that's where the rubber meets the road. And so corporations are responding to that. So fine, great, listen to us. That's fine.
Yeah.
Kyle, did you had something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, like, I think it's beautiful that progressives still think that this way, and it's great to have that hope, but there's no evidence from the last 40 years to suggest that Republicans are in any way productive partners in legislation. The primary objective of a conservative party is to conserve, and that means gain power and keep power by any means necessary. That's the only lens through which Republicans make policy. Mm-hmm. And the primary objective of progressive parties is to change things, which is inherently harder for humans. I mean, I'm sure we're all experiencing now as lockdowns are easing with this sort of anxiety about doing what we did for the first X decades of our lives, but didn't do for a year because that change is so extreme. And so ultimately, I'd rather get it done than get it done collaboratively. So for me, it's about fierce progressivism and unapologetic progressivism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maya, we've been a lot of people have been really wanting to get that voter protection file if possible. If you have it on Google Drive or anything like that, that would be great.
Yeah, so I just reposted it. I think there was a problem with the first link, but it should be.
Second link also thinks it's from it's talking to your computer.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, I'll sort that out and I'll send it along. Okay. In fact, I think I can send to all the participants, and I'll just send out a kind of bump of information from that would probably be easier.
Yeah. Maya, yeah, we had a couple people commenting that the link you posted was on your machine and not, but you can send that out with.
I will send that out to all the participants along with some other information that we've
Right.
got in links from
I just want to say thank you very much to Kyle, who has to leave us at the moment. But
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Virtual baby shower, because this is our life now.
Thank you for taking part in this, Kyle. You've been amazing, and we really appreciate it and appreciate your time. And good luck with the book, which is being published. Woohoo! This book is being published next week.
Next week.
That's great.
Yeah,
next week. So go and get it.
Thanks,
Before everyone jumps off the call, I just wanted to say this event is part of a months-long voting rights themed for the whole of April in DAUK, and so there are lots of events happening, which will be great. And I'm going to post a link to see further. One that I would highly recommend is the film screening of Suppressed, which is happening next week. It's done by the film committee, and well, the film committee have done loads of really amazing films, but this one, she's managed to secure permissions to do for a global audience. Often they're not. So this time, so it's a real opportunity for this audience if you're interested to take part, and that's on the 16th, and I'm posting that in the chat box now. So that's quite a long link. Elaine, if you've got another that is shorter, which you can keep posting around. Someone's just asked what Kyle's book is about. It's about big tech and data security and that kind of thing. And I can post some information about that to the attendees when I get that. So that'd be great. And so for people who want to find out more about the Voting Rights and Democracy Group of PNR, and they want to find out other events or indeed about voter protection, I'm going to put a link in the chat box for that as well. Yeah, all right, so Elaine's just put her link in for Suppressed. But I really want to thank everybody who has joined us today. This was an amazing collaborative effort, and something certainly with the panelists that I've been wanting to do with them for nearly a year, because we all worked together on the platform together. So that was amazing. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today and for your time. So yeah, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maya, and everyone. Wen had a quick thing she wanted to mention. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I can. Just wanted to put in and say thank you. I know it was a ton of work, Maya, and the work that you've been doing with Julia and the whole voter protection team. Just, you know, and you've worked on, I guess, dozens of cases, helping us abroad, you know, make sure that our vote is counted. So, you know, I think all of you on this call, you know so much more about the topic than I do. And just thank you so much for educating us and taking the time, everyone, to do this today.
Oh, well, thank you. And I just want to say the voter protection team, it really is Julia's brainchild, and without her coming up with the idea and really pushing it and knowing how important it was going to be for 2020 and doing that, you know, it wouldn't have happened. And she's been a great person to work with, so we really appreciate.
Likewise with you. Over to you too. Virtual fist bump.
Thank you for joining us today, Julia.
Oh, my pleasure. And also, we all started the same place that you're starting, so you are going to be an expert too.
Yeah. That's great. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording so that we can, if anyone wants to hang out afterwards, you're welcome to. The recording is now stopped.